today. Right, go ahead. How'd you get here?
Ah, Lambert Road, when I was born, was a dirt road. I was born obviously in a hospital in New Haven, but from there I grew up on Lambert Road and been in Orange all my life, other than a few years for college in Boston. And Lambert Road, I mentioned, was a dirt road. My parents built a house there. It was muddy one day, and the lumber company truck got stuck in the mud. This is Lambert Road. Everybody thinks of that now. It's nice and paved. Closest house was probably a half a mile away. Ewins are 500 Lambert Road. From there up to Ewins Barn, I think it's close to a half a mile. Not sure exactly, but that's where our mailbox was. You want to get the mail, usually my father would pick it up on the way home. And Lambert Road at Porter Lane, the Derby Railroad, New Haven Derby line, goes through the center of town. There used to be a terminal down here, the railroad station down where the drug stores used to be, and now the convenience store there. And anyway, where it went across Lambert Road, the railroad abutment for a bridge going over Lambert Road was there, and the town used to drive up and dump sand off the top of that, so it would be down on the Lambert Road and build up to the top of the abutment that was the old abutment from the trains. That was something for us kids to run along and jump into the sand pile. So you're way up high jumping down towards Lambert Road, but this huge sand pile. And Lambert Road from Route 1 was probably close to a mile where I grew up. And it's actually behind what is now High Plains School. And Clark property was pretty much everywhere in that area. The High Plains all the way to Lambert Road, and across Lambert Road was Clark's and Ewins, Porter Lane to Tyler City Road, and Lambert Road to Orange Center Road. That whole block, I believe, was all Clark property. And down on Route 1, back in the 40s, 50s, there were a few restaurants. Black Horse Inn was one of them, and that became the area. That Greenblatt's was in there. And things have changed so much down there. It's really built up. The Vinnie's Hardware was the one place I really remember going to as a small child. And Oasis Restaurant, the entrance to the dump on the right there, that was Oasis Restaurant. And let's see, the Dogwood Inn, corner of Bull Hill Lane and Route 1. There was, I believe that was Dogwood Inn. There was also one down the street. Grossman's was in there years ago. Going back in the 1800s, there were several farms all over the town. Small farms, people had vegetables, some had cows. Back then, recycling milk bottles meant you had glass milk bottles, and they returned them and cleaned them and got them back again. You didn't just have plastic and throw it out. And the milk bottles, several people collect them throughout the state. I have milk bottles from the town of Orange. The Knights started their lawnmower business. Frank started it, I believe, right on Orange Center Road, just south of Old Tavern Road. He had started his lawnmower business there, I believe, and moved it onto Route 1, and most people know where Knight's Lawnmower is now. I remember when McDonald's first came into Orange, I believe it was in the 50s. It was like 10 cents for a hamburger, and the golf driving range was next to that, and a jump land for a trampoline center. And prior to that, there were cabins. Now you think of motels. Back then, they had individual cabins. There was one of them was right there at more or less where McDonald's is now. And see, down the other end of Route 1, there was a gas station. Might have been Peckingham's, I'm not sure. Or maybe Peckingham's was on the West Haven line. There was one more or less where across from McDonald's on the other side. And then down west, the Milford end, there was a garage in there, trucking garage, just repairs. And Barker's and Sabres were corner of Peck Lane. The dump was a real dump. It wasn't the transfer station that it is now. You just take stuff down there and they'd bury it. Coming up Orange Center Road, I went to Orange Center School. It was the only school in town. They built the High Plains in, I believe, 1955 or 6, somewhere in there. And Amity, it was grade 7 through 12. We went 6 grades in Orange and then 7 through 12 at Amity up in Woodbridge. Then they built the junior highs in Orange and Bethany.
So Orange Center School, that was
Orange
Community Center?
No, Orange Center School is now Mary L. Tracy School. Mary L. Tracy was the principal in the school when I was there, and it changed a couple times. It was you can end up work with that, or let's see. So we're now in the firehouse, the original firehouse, or not the original, because actually the train station was the original firehouse, I believe. So the Orange Center School was now Mary L. Tracy School. It changed a few times. It was, I believe it was used even as a community center for a while, and then changed to the total kindergarten. And let's see, as you go down the hill on Orange Center Road from the school, you got the shopping center, which that area, there was some, Scobie had a grocery store way back in the early 1900s. And the post office there, I think it was in the grocery store. And right now you've got the shopping center there with different barbers and dentists, etc. And Route 34, there was a trolley line that went from New Haven to Derby on the center of, or was Derby Avenue.
And around when was that?
Not sure, 1800s into maybe 1940s. I'm not sure when it was taken out. State Highway Garage is up on Route 34 now, and Amity Junior High School is off behind the gas station up there. Grassy Hill Road, Woodruff Seed, in the mid-50s, the seed barn burned down, and I have a few collectible things from the Woodruff Seed Company in Orange, Connecticut. They grew the seed here. Farms, there were many farms in the town. I mentioned earlier, I think that some of the farms were dairy farms, some were vegetable farms. Back in those days, people had to go out and grow their own things in their own yards also. Now we go out and buy everything in the store.
So you said your parents moved to Orange? When did your parents move to Orange?
I believe in 1941, my parents built a house in Orange on Lambert Road.
It's before you were born?
Yes, yeah.
And what did your parents do?
My father worked in New Haven. Back in those days, a commute was just to go from Orange to New Haven. Nowadays, you go to New York City and you go to Hartford and all over the place. But back then,
And where
when
did they live before Orange?
New Haven, West Haven.
And what made them want to move to Orange?
Obviously, it was very rural back then. It was we had a pond or some lake, not a lake, but we had a stream going through, and my parents had a pond built out of it. So I grew up in that area. It was a good way to grow up, listening to the water and so on. Open the windows at night and hear it. The ham radio operators, I have a lot of postcards, and there are several postcards of ham radio operators in town, which is just an individual that has a radio that they can talk around the world in many cases. And one of the things about, I'm also the emergency management director in town, and Tino Russo's my assistant. We are here to help in any typical problems or power outages and hurricanes and so on, but any emergency, the emergency management has a CERT team comes under it, the Community Emergency Response Team, and we open the shelters when necessary. That's at High Plains Community Center. The emergency management also has monthly meetings. We have fire and police and highway department, education, health department, many of the departments in town, social services. We meet once a month and discuss things that each individual department has going on. And going back to some of the early buildings, the police department was originally that I remember, Route 1. Trying to think what's just really near there. The Orange Fence Company was probably a little bit east of there. And then they built the house on Route 1 just west of Lambert Road, where the firehouse is now. And that became the teen center. And then I guess from there it was torn down and firehouse was built there.
So what got you involved? So your first involvement with the town was the fire department?
My first department, yes. I joined the Orange Volunteer Fire Department in 1964. And back then, fire department, people are used to the firemen totally covered with their turnout gear and air tanks and so on. But back when I joined, you had hip boots and you had a raincoat and you had a helmet. And things have changed very much for the best. We got people that are protected now, that totally from head to toe, you have protection around you. You're going into a fire.
And you were how old when you first started?
Around 20, 21, somewhere in there.
And what made you want to get involved with the fire department?
My father was in it prior to me, so that was the incentive right there. I was going to fire calls, mostly the grass fires. Back then, on a weekend, you'd have 15 fire calls for grass fires. And people burning leaves and gets out of control and so on. So I grew up with that, and that with the carnival. We had the carnival on the green. The individual booths back then, one my father had was bacon and ham, and when I started getting involved, we moved it into models, the airplane and ship models and so on, car models. Let's see, there was fruit baskets and different ball games and so on. They started out with one Ferris wheel and tilt-a-whirl, and some of the green started to get covered with everything, and moved over to behind the Orange Center School, which is now Mary L. Tracy, and I think it was a couple of years there, and then the fairgrounds. So the fairgrounds, I have several postcards of the original fair, was way back in the early 1900s. They had fairs and horse-drawn wagons and had them decorated with flowers and had a parade back then. Now you see the parades are fire trucks and police cars and marching bands, etc. Back then they had on the ground horse track and horse-drawn vehicles with decorative. I learned a lot of this stuff from postcards. I've got about 100 postcards of the town of Orange.
We're gonna have
Most-
to scan those.
Yeah, most of those are early. They're 1900, early 1900.
And Fred, go back and talk more about, I like the way that you branched off from the fire department and went into the emergency management, which is something that a lot of towns don't have a strong support team in. And I think Orange's is very, very strong, especially I know our CERT division of it. I know that there was an area of town that actually came and joined our town because our town was so strong in it. And I think that a lot of that leads back to you and your leadership. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've been doing this 20, 25 years, and I'm not sure exactly what year I was first appointed, but it goes back to a lot of training. The state of Connecticut provides a lot of different training. I remember one that was several days on plane crashes, and most people don't know it. I can think of 2 plane crashes we've had in the town of Orange. One was on Heinz Farm. It was a small plane, and there was one on Hitchcock Court down in the woods at the end of Hitchcock Court, and again, a small plane. But the training that I really remember was if you had a full-size airliner come down with a lot of people, you have major problems. And state and federal government is there to back you up. They have tractor trailers that can come in that are set up for freezers, which now with COVID, you probably heard about a lot of this. The hospitals have had these trailer trucks that they have to use, the refrigerated trailer trucks for storage of bodies, etc. And these mass casualties. And the shelters, High Plains Community Center, we've opened it a few times now. The Community Emergency Response Team, which everybody refers to as CERT, that's very helpful. They have been providing the, I think it was about 5 days that we were open there for one of the storms. So typically everybody thinks of ice storms and hurricanes and so on, snowstorms, where if you have loss of power, people need to, one of the major things nowadays is just charging cell phones and so on. We have that available, but some people actually need to be housed because of the loss of power. You don't have heat in the winter time. We have a few members that are ham radio operators. They can talk with people around the world, but just for what we're talking about, it's just being able to talk to people throughout the state. We have radio systems that the state has provided, and ham radio operators are capable of talking through their radios through other ham radio operators, which I don't believe we've really had the opportunity, but we're ready if we have to. They could be riding in a police car or fire truck if there's no other communications. If the radio towers go down, we can put a radio tower up in about an hour. It's just a matter of putting a bunch of pieces together and putting the antenna on top of it, and it's we have those available.
And again, that's volunteers.
Yeah, 100% volunteers. Yeah. Fire department, 100% volunteers. The emergency management and the CERT. this town is a lot of volunteers, the Board of Selectmen, the different groups that have agricultural fair especially, another big one. There's several different organizations, historical society, with different boards, education, etc.
Yeah, volunteerism is strong, and I think
Yeah.
I think it's a good community because of it. I really do. Is there any other exciting things that you remember? And I love the story about you jumping off of the railroad track into the pile of sand. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, as kids, we loved doing that. It was,
And tell us about that, being a kid back in the day. You're talking about half a mile to go down the road just to get your mail out of, the mailbox. Obviously, there was not a wealth of neighborhood kids because there were no neighborhoods really back in the day. So how did that work out for you? Were you able to go over to friends' houses that perhaps were a distance away?
yeah, bicycles depend on the age. Anywhere, you get 6, 8 years old, you start. In this town, back then, you could ride all over the place. Nowadays, there's so much traffic and other problems that parents are more reluctant to let you go when you're young. But back then, where I was, it was half a mile to get to any friend's house. A bus would stop in front of the house, school bus. But the mail was way up the street, and it was, I think, the mid-'50s before there were houses right in the neighborhood where I had friends to play with. So I'd be going up to, actually, Art Williams was one of the friends I used to ride all the way over to where he lived. It was off of Orange Center Road west
Right.
of there. Is that Petro Circle, I think?
Yeah,
Petro
right,
Circle.
Right.
Yeah, and
Gosh.
be riding all over town back then.
Can't do that too much
Mhm.
now. Mm-mm.
A lot of traffic out there now.
Definitely, definitely. So you came here because your father obviously wanted to come out into a more rural setting, which I think is great. I think you yourself live in a house that is kind of off the beaten track and a little quieter than central Orange. What do you think about us? I'm trying to think. Where does Orange go from here? Where would you envision? And I'm just really going off on this one. They usually do this, I'm doing it. So where do you think, as far as like looking at Orange and stuff, to go the next 50 years? Keeping it kind of the way it is? Can you see big major changes? I mean, you saw big changes, just big neighborhoods starting and stuff. And I'm just curious, some of us have really kind of started thinking, where is Orange gonna go? Some of
Yeah,
these new
you
state
go back,
laws and
go
stuff.
back 60, 70 years ago, I think there was about 5,000, 4,000 people in town. Now we're at 14,000,
Right,
and
right,
people are traveling a long way to go to work.
right.
It's and now it looks like a lot of the future is going to be working from home. That's what a lot of the people are doing. You still need the trades anywhere, plumbing, electrical, etc. So some people will still be out there, but yeah, there's major changes coming when it comes to the computer,
Right.
communication and working from home, and so on.
It's interesting you talk about the ham radios. We all don't realize that there could be a situation where we don't have any way of communicating,
Yeah,
except for going back to a standard like the ham radios.
yeah. You look at Russia going into Ukraine; they're losing everything, and ham radios can still do their transmitting,
Message.
get the message out. And that's what a lot of it over the years, ham radio has been involved in. Emergency preparedness for their towns and so on.
Good. Does that have to be licensed? Do you have to have a license to operate?
Yes, ham radio, the
Yeah.
federal government, Federal Communications has a license. You have to take a course and a test and so on.
Interesting. Good. And we have several people in town that I think you said are connected with the ham radios.
Yes, there are.
Awesome.
Yep.
Good, good. Any other memorable stories of growing up, besides the sand pile?
Yeah, that's a real memorable one.
That's
I don't
cool.
know, just
Did you ever see the train go by? Because the
never
train,
seen a train go by.
when did
Not.
the train stop?
Oh no,
That
no.
was in 46, I think?
I'm not sure. But no,
Yeah.
I don't remember the trains or the trolleys.
And were the tracks gone by the time the tracks were taken down
Yeah,
at that point?
yeah, they were gone. Yep.
Do you have any memories with your volunteer firemen? Your fellow members that you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Like
As
a
far
big-
as the fire department is concerned, there's one historical thing I was thinking about is, I believe it's Webster Bank now in the corner of Racebrook Road and Route 1. There was a halfway house there, and that was a big old building that I think at one time had lodging with food and so on for people traveling between New York and Boston. And Route 1 obviously is a major highway. You can go from Florida to Maine, and then 95 came in. That was in the middle 50s. They were building I-95.
Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, I remember not the construction itself, but getting to use it and so on.
Yeah.
It was, I didn't get up there. There were a lot of farms up in Orange on Marsh Hill Road where the I-95 went through. And back then they just had a restaurant where now you have all these fast food places and restaurants. Where back then they used to have sit-down restaurants on
On
interchanges
First Road, yeah.
and the interchanges even.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, fancy. Oh. Yeah, check your notes. Anything else there?
Do you have any like funny memories or just significant memories with like the nights working with like Fred Knight or
With the fire department?
with the fire department?
Yeah.
Yeah, just in general.
Yeah, well, the fire department, when I joined, fire chief was Chris Winkle. He lived up on Derby Milford Road. He had about a 1950, I think it was a green pickup truck with a siren on the roof. And back then, the fire trucks actually had all the fire gear on them. And when we got to a fire call, we would take the raincoats and the boots and the helmet off and go and extinguish the fires. There were a lot of grass fires on weekends. The Knight family was involved right from the beginning of the department. Chief Knight from back in, I believe, 1925-ish, fire department was established. And several of the Knight, Fred Knight and John Knight were also, and well, Frank Knight before their father. So I guess that's what, 4 generations?
Yeah,
One to
four.
4 generations of the Knight family in the fire department. And
And how about going back into your emergency hat for a while? What do you think was the worst in your lifetime emergency that the town had to face? What would you have pinpointed and say, this was a really bad one?
I guess as far as emergency management is concerned, the opening the shelter is probably one of the main things that went on for time. Open it for a week, and we had
There was an ice storm,
hurricanes,
wasn't there?
ice storms, and one year we had 30 inches of snowfall, which just slowed everything down. But the highway department in this town is very good, so it didn't take too long. The federal funds came in after most of the work was already done. You get it done too fast and the federal money isn't there. That money was, I think it started like a day afterwards. And there were a couple of times when the town of Orange did get a substantial amount of federal funds for some of the problems we've had over the years.
And who's required, is that your job to fill out all the paperwork for
It's-
that, or is that?
Back then,
effort.
back in those days, we all got involved, each department that was involved in the town, highway, police, fire, et cetera, would all have to keep track of time and materials and so on, and have that available for getting reimbursements through the state for federal funds.
Right. Awesome. Well, I go back to that, to me, the worst storm I think that we ever had in Orange, it was when we had the flood back in '82, and we called it the 100-year flood. Do you remember? And that was before you had the shelter, all that stuff, and I think that to me was probably the worst. We've gone through hurricanes, ice storms, and everything, but that to me was just such a different type of storm. You know, do you remember
there was-
being out on that? Because I know the fire department, they were out the entire time.
Yeah, that was, I believe there was one loss of life. I
Yeah.
thought it was it Old Grassy Hill Road and
Grassy Hill Road.
Weppawag River. Yeah, that got washed out, and that's a lot of flooding in the Weppawag River all the way through the town. And one of the other things that just reminded me of was the time the water line on Grassy Hill Road erupted and washed out a big hole, and the police car was sitting right near the little hole, and the hole got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the police car ended up down in that hole.
And I think the police department actually has that picture
Yes,
on the wall somewhere.
yeah, right. Yep.
Picture that
Picture of
car.
the police car down in, yeah, I think Bob Stanky, I
Bob
believe, was the
And I
one
think
that.
the funnier thing was that back in that time period, the radios were connected to the car. It was all the wired radios, you'd take it off the dashboard and speak into it, but it was still connected. And I think that was the funniest thing, because I think someone captured a picture of Bob talking on the radio, and this little coil going down into this hole where the car was. But yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah. As you talk, you think about different things.
Quite interesting. But, you know, I think going back to that volunteering thing, which you know, situations like that, it's just amazing how everybody pitches in, gets the job done, and helps out the situation, whatever it might be.
Yeah, volunteerism in this
Right.
town has been excellent
Yeah.
through all the different departments. And,
Yeah, definitely, so, you know, it's a good town,
yeah,
good town. Well,
Yeah, I think a common thing is expressing the importance of volunteerism and the significance of it.
yeah, that's one of the things I've been involved in between the fire department, emergency management, and the CERT team. And all volunteers. Typically, we have monthly meetings to discuss what might happen and be prepared. The whole thing with emergency management is be prepared. In recent years with COVID, we've had distribution of masks and test equipment, or test
yeah, kids, yeah.
kits. That's the word I'm looking for. So the emergency management and fire department and police department, we had actually years ago scheduled this method of having people come in their cars, go through High Plains Community Center around back, and this would be a method of distributing either inoculations or pills and different health emergencies. So when it came to COVID, it was all set up. We knew what we were going to be doing, and ended up the emergency kits for COVID, the test kits, and the masks we distributed through the High Plains Community Center with the CERT team and fire department, police department, and it went off very well. At one point, the traffic was backed up a long, long way on Orange Center Road, but once we opened it up, it just moved right along, moved very quickly.
You had a plan, and that's the key. And that takes time and effort to do those meetings and really map it out. And I think with the
Yes.
OVNA too, there was wasn't there a clinic that I think some of your members also supported the OVNA to help get people, their vaccines and so on, right?
Yes, the COVID vaccine clinic was established at the High Plains Community Center with the health department and our CERT team, and the police were involved and the fire department, different people helped. Yeah, there were a couple of ways. We were trying to limit it to people in town and get especially elderly there. They wouldn't have to travel out of town to go to the big clinics that, you know, Yale had 1,000 a day or whatever. Well, we did 150 a day. We had volunteers that were nurses and EMTs and so on that would do the inoculations. And then we had to have people that checked you in and others to watch that 15 minutes after you got the shot, make sure there were no reactions. And High Plains Community Center was used for that.
Excellent. Good. I think, good?
Good.
Good.
Good, great.
The end.
Thank you. The end. Ta-da! But no, that's wonderful, really. Thank you.